Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. What I got here behind me is a 1945 Ford 2N. If any of you follow my channel, yes, this is the exact same tractor that I did the full restoration on mechanically. Right now I'm going to be getting ready to convert this over to a 12 volt. Now I know a lot of people are going to say, why in the world are you doing that? Well, first, I don't have to. The tractor is not wore out. It will run and start fine in the cold weather. I am just really getting frustrated. Maybe about the last 10 years or so, the generators are just not holding up. I use these Ford tractors a lot, sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day of hard mowing. They're only lasting about a year or two. It becomes very frustrating, expensive to keep fixing. I personally think it's the cheap brushes, armature that is being produced today. Years ago, never had a problem with them. 6 volt, I'm a 6 volt guy, I have nothing against it. Most of my show tractors around here are still 6 volt. I don't have a problem with them because I'm not racking up the hours on them. Also, once this tractor gets completely restored into a show tractor, I have a few little ideas I'm going to do to be a little bit different, and I actually need the 12 volt. So that is why I'm converting this. Not only am I converting it to 12 volt, I'm going to be installing electronic ignition, which I'd highly recommend if you're going the 12 volt route. It really eliminates a lot of problems. I'll be going, as I go through this, I'll be discussing a lot of things, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and some options. This by far is the easiest, in my opinion, on how to do a 12 volt conversion. So many times I see these Ford tractors especially, they got wires hanging everywhere. It's like a nest. There's resistors hanging everywhere. It is just a mess. You'll see here, this is a real clean conversion. There's just literally a few wires. We got a 1-wire alternator here that's self-energizing, and you'll see just how simple it is. If this is something that you would consider doing to your Ford tractor, I encourage you to keep watching here. I'm actually going to be removing the hood. You do not need to do this to do a 12 volt conversion. There's 2 reasons why I'm removing the hood, and that is because, one, it's easy for you to see as I do this 12 volt conversion, and I'm also going to be replacing the radiator in this tractor. It's pretty bad. I'm not going to go into detail with that. I want to try to keep this video strictly about the 12 volt conversion, but I will maybe show you some pictures of it. It is a brand new radiator, and it's a SparX brand. I highly recommend them, and I'll show you why a little bit later in the video. But stay tuned, sit back and enjoy the 12 volt conversion. Okay, I got everything cleaned up here. There was a lot of dust and dirt up front. We do use this tractor, and they do get quite dirty up front there. Just so it looks a little bit more presentable and you can see a lot better. I want to first talk about this generator, and I want to talk about why I am switching to 12 volt, because this can be sometimes a heated discussion in some of the online discussion groups and everything. A lot of people are against 12 volt. They want to stick with the original, and I just want to talk a little bit about my experiences and why I am changing. Okay, what you're looking at now is the back side of the generator. This is a original Ford generator that would be found on this tractor. One of the cool things about the Ford generators is, see this little screw right here? You can adjust the charging on that. For example, if you're running in the daytime, whether you're plowing or mowing or whatever, you really don't need a whole lot of current to charge your battery. But say at night, when you got lights and everything on, the idea was you just get your little screwdriver, turn that up a little bit, and you'd be charging a little bit more. Now, one of the things that a lot of people think of when they look at their amp gauge and that thing's bouncing clear to the positive, you know, way like 5-10 amps, that is not a good thing. You will cook these things in a short amount of time, believe it or not. You basically want it just off, just a little bit to the positive side, just enough to replace what you're using up. But I am a 6-volt guy. I have nothing against 6-volt systems. This tractor will start on the coldest of days. I never have a problem. However, I'd say about the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, I've been having a lot of trouble. These generators are only lasting about a year, 2 years if I'm lucky. Starting to get very frustrating and very expensive. I personally think that it is just the cheap parts that we get today, these Chinese, overseas, the brushes, the armature, they're not just holding up. I mean, years ago, my goodness, I never had an issue. We would go, I mean, we use these tractors a good bit, like this particular tractor we're working on here. I cut fields for other people, 8 to 10 hours a day, hard driving. They're just not holding up anymore. I have many show tractors that still have the 6-volt. They're fine because, you know, you're just putting around at shows or just around home here enjoying them. It's really not that much of an issue, but it seems like with the tractors that you use a lot, they're just not working out anymore. Also, I had a lot of problems with the cutout relays on these Ford 9N 2Ns tractors. I'll show you that a little bit later, but anyhow, I'm going to remove this generator and we're going to start getting set up for the brand new alternator. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is take this original bracket off. I'm going to zoom in here. This was what held the top part of the generator and kept the tension. It is now going to be replaced with this bracket. This came in my 12-volt kit. I don't think I mentioned that. This is a kit that I'm using. I'm not creating this on my own. If you're doing this, now I have the radiator off because I want to replace it. Even if you're doing this, I would highly recommend that you drain your coolant, because there's about 50-50 shot when you go to take that head stud or head nut off. A lot of times the stud will unscrew out of the block instead of the nut actually turning. And when that happens, you have a big mess. The coolant will shoot and gush out everywhere. So it's actually a really good time to change your coolant. I always say if you can't remember when you changed it, it's time to change it. There's, you know, everybody's always worried about freezing, which is very, very important. However, just as important, the corrosion control with good coolant really goes a long way. You get some of these antique tractors I've tore apart. It's terrible. I think people just put straight water in them a lot of times. They get so crowded up, the water jacket is literally just almost completely solid, full of rust and junk. So always a good idea to keep care of your coolant and keep it changed frequently. Now, I got lucky on that one. The nut is actually coming off. That's what you want to have happen, but like I said, a lot of times this stud will unthread out of the block and you have a little geyser going on. I'm going to retorque these nuts down. The nuts on these heads are anywhere from 50 to 55 foot-pounds. So I always go ahead and make sure that I retorque it. There it is. Now that I got the brand new belt on and I got the alternator up in place, I'm going to put this last top bracket on, and then we'll be able to snug everything down. Okay, I got everything on, adjusted, and bolted down. Just a couple things I didn't point out. I had already painted these brackets, the bottom, the top, and the one that bolts to the head. They do come bare. I got this kit from Just 8 Ends. Now, the reason why I get from them, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I like the way their top bracket is. It's got a little bit of a curve to it. It's nice and curved at the end. A lot of the brackets that I see, like cheap on eBay and stuff, it'll just be a flat piece of metal. It sticks way out, and then they just got some holes in it. It looks kind of cheap. It looks like something I would fabricate. And then to me, it seems like the alternator sticks way out too far. These kits seem to bring the alternator in, and then once we have the hood back on, you'll see what I mean. It doesn't stick out any further than what the original generator is. One of the reasons for years I just couldn't stand when people put 12 volts, especially on these Fords, is because I just don't like the looks of an alternator. It doesn't look time period correct. And then also what I did was to try to, I painted this black. This alternator came in its natural shiny aluminum color. I took it all apart, took the fan off, the pulley and everything. I painted that all up, and it just really kind of blends in right now. You don't have it just so noticeable when you walk up to it. And once this tractor is all restored cosmetically and everything's all shiny and new, it really isn't that big of a deal to me anymore. It's just so nice to not have to mess with some of the junky electrical parts. You eliminate a lot of that, and I'll talk about that when we go to put the wiring harness on. But remember, we're also going to be putting the electronic ignition into this distributor. It is so nice anymore. Again, the parts are just junk. The condensers just aren't holding up anymore. You eliminate condenser, you eliminate the points, and it's just a really simple setup. So I'm going to get going here on the wiring harness, and I'll explain some things about that. Okay, I have the wiring harness here laying on the ground. A lot of people always say, well, I make my own, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that. I just went ahead and bought, this is the fourth wiring harness I've bought. The reason why I bought it is about time I go buy all the wire and the nice colors and the connectors and the conduit, I probably have more money tied up into wires that are just going to lay on the shelf on the spool than what it actually costs to purchase this. But this wiring harness is actually made for the 9N, 2N, and 8N. On the 8N, you would need this white wire, and this white wire right here especially would be going onto the solenoid on the starter. The 9Ns and 2Ns are a little bit different. They do not need that, so when I put this on, I'm just going to cut the white wire off. There's no real need for it. But I'm going to show you something, some positive things about the 12 volt system here in just a little bit. Okay, on the 9Ns and 2Ns, you will have originally a cutout relay, and it would be mounted right here. The original one for this tractor was on here for probably 50 some years. It even had Ford still scripted in it. It finally bit the dust. Can't complain. I mean, it lasted a long time. And then what you get now is these cheap things. Well, we have 3 Fords that we use on a regular basis, so I have plenty of these things laying around. And when you take that cap off, all it is just a little set of points. When the tractor starts and the generator starts functioning, these points will close, and that will eventually then charge your battery that sits up there. Now the only thing is, most of these I bought 3 in one day at 3 different locations, and I popped the cap off, and these points will be stuck from the factory. And even if they're not stuck through time, when you go to shut your tractor off, they have a habit of staying stuck. When the tractor shuts off, it must open. If it does not open, the generator, well, now it's an alternator, but the generator will actually turn into an electric motor. It'll take power from the battery to the generator, and it will start to turn. Now if you don't have a belt hooked up to it, you would never know that it's trying to turn, but it will sit there and spin like an electric motor. What happens is it can't turn, you don't realize that it's struggling, and you walk away from the tractor, then you come back a little bit later and your battery is dead. So if you have a problem with your battery always being dead, one, it might not be charging, but two, if you have one of these doodads, that's probably the biggest culprit right there. Now they have come out with electrode diodes. Okay, now this one I made, I think I went to Radio Shack and got, here's the diode right here at the end of my thumb, and you have to solder this here and everything. I never had any luck with that either. Now they make brand new ones. I think they're about 60-70 bucks. They have a diode in them. I have never tried one. I just didn't feel like spending $60-70 and be disappointed. But the good thing is now there's no need for that. There will simply be nothing there anymore. Now you 8N guys, you will have a regulator up here on your 8N. If you're doing a 12 volt conversion on an 8N, you will not need that regulator. You can either just leave it there or you can take it off. It's not going to be functional anymore because your regulator is now into the alternator, and this is a self-energizing one wire. I know a lot of people have what are they, 3-wire alternators. I personally just don't think it's necessary. This will kick in about around 600 to 800 RPM. The tractor idles around 400 to 500 RPM, so basically once you start a little fast idle, it's going to kick in. You'll see it on your gauge that it is working. So what on this tractor, a little fun thing that I did, when I got disgusted with these cutout relays, I actually just wired a toggle switch up here. When the tractor would start, I would flip it on. Basically, I was just manually being a cutout relay. Now the only thing is, when you shut the tractor off, you had to make sure that you turned it off. If not, your battery would be draining because the generator would be turning into an electric motor again. It's kind of a pain in the butt when you're turning it on and off and jumping on and off the tractor working, but I got used to it. But now there will be no need for that. There will be no need for a cutout. That alternator is going to take care of everything. I went ahead and attached the wiring harness. This particular tractor has the tube that the spark plug wires go into. It's actually kind of rare anymore. Most people would have tossed this away because it is a pain to get all those wires through there. A lot of times you'll see them, they'll be cut right about here. People will have the wires go up through and then it will be all exposed out in the open, but I don't want to get rid of that. I like that, having that way for just to be original. But what I did was I just zip tied the wiring harness underneath there. Looks pretty clean. You don't really even know that it's there. And I went ahead and put a brand new amp gauge. This is a new style. See the two studs there that the red wires are connected to. The old original style gauge, if you have one, looks like this. It has that little metal loop where the wire will go through, and believe it or not, that picks up and it will read what your generator is putting out. But with this new system, you're going to have the updated gauge. That little block right there with the 3 studs coming out of it is called the ballast resistor. Now there are resistors and then there's ballast resistors. That is a ballast resistor. The difference between the two is that the ballast resistor, it creates more resistance as current goes through it. So basically when you start the tractor and it's cold, you will have not much resistance at all. As the ignition is on and the heat or the current goes through it, it will get hotter and it will produce more of a resistance. Believe it or not, that helps in the starting of the tractor. It'll actually put more voltage to the distributor and to help to start the engine. And then, like I said, once it starts running, it will get warm and then it will create more of a resistance. The reason is that will protect your your points and everything. It won't burn them up. I'm going to use that's the original one, believe it or not, and I'm going to reuse it because it's working fine. I'm going to talk a little bit about resistors here when I bring you up to the front, and I'm going to talk about this front mount distributor. I'll take you up top here. This is the new battery, 12-volt battery. I went ahead and made brand new cables and connectors and everything, and I just went and holding the battery down. This is just the flat piece of metal. I rounded off, and it really holds it good. I didn't show this, me doing this, because everybody probably has their own idea of how to do it, but this works really good for me. I've done it a few other times on some other tractors. So right now we are ready to test to make sure that the power is getting to not only the distributor but out to the spark plugs. Alright, we're up at the front of the distributor now, and I just wanted to touch base on these resistors and everything you may have heard about. This is a brand new ballast resistor that I just showed you on the back of the dash there. Like I said, I'm going to use the old one. It's working fine. But this gives you a little bit better idea of what they look like. This part here, that little curly Q, the wire, that gets very hot, believe it or not. So if you're mowing or got a lot of weeds or dirt up there, it will smoke. So it's always a good idea to kind of keep that clean around there. But a lot of people, when they're doing a 12-volt conversion, they will keep the 6-volt coil. I personally like to switch it to a 12, and the reason is, if you have the 6-volt coil, you will have to have a inline resistor. They're made out of ceramic, they're white. Unfortunately I don't have them here to show you, but they're pretty common. You would have to put that in this wire, or in this line at somewhere up in where I showed you in the wiring harness. It makes it hard with a wiring harness to be able, you'd have to cut it open and put it in there. But like I said, when you switch to a 12-volt coil, you do not need that inline resistor if you go with the 12-volt. So with the resistance that this creates and the resistance of the 12-volt coil, you have enough resistance that your points will not fry. Okay? So, and a lot of people don't want to spend the money on a 12-volt coil because they are a little bit more, but I just don't like having that extra resistor in there. There's really not solving anything by having that, in my opinion. One of the things I wanted to show here, it's a lot of people think that these distributors can be put on two different ways. That is false. It will only go on one way, and I'll show you why. Probably going to be really hard to see on camera here, but these two prongs here, I don't know if you can see, it is not centered in the very center of the distributor shaft. And if you would look down in here, the cam right here, there's a slot where those two things fit in. That slot is actually off center too. So this will only go on one way, which is very helpful. It would almost be impossible to have it 180 degrees out. If you would force it in, you'd probably be starting to break stuff. You would know that something's definitely wrong. Also, if you were 180 degrees out of time, you would almost have to just switch your wires around, which is kind of hard to do, especially as you can see here, these wires have been on here a while. They pretty much form themselves. So I always see on the internet discussion groups and such, everybody always says, oh, it's 180 degrees out of time. Well, I don't want to say it's impossible, but you would have to have your wires switched, because this will only fit on one way. I heard of one time some guy had so much play in there that he was able to do it, but I don't understand why there would be that much play in one of those. Something would have to have been drastically wrong. But we're going to take this up to the bench, and I'm going to show you how to put the electronic ignition in. Alright, now the distributor is up on the bench here, and we get a little bit of understanding what's going on here with this electronic ignition. First thing you want to do would be pull your rotor cap off, and then there is this giant ring that sits down into a groove. You'll see in the housing here. I went ahead and take that out. I just got needle nose pliers. It pops right out. You'll also want to take, there's a screw on this side for your static timing. Take that out, and then you want to disconnect your condenser wire from the points on the top little bolt there, and then it should be able to come right out here. Might have to help it a little bit. There we go. And believe it or not, this whole plate now, if you're going with the electronic ignition, you can just set it to the side. You will not need it ever again. One of the things that why I'm deciding to go with the electronic ignition, I have a few other tractors with it on, and I love it. I really can't complain about them at all. The frustration with the quality of points these days, the condensers here are just junk. They're not lasting long at all anymore. I know a lot of guys will say you need blue streak points. Last time I went to Napa and asked for blue streak points, they gave me some other brand. I can't think of the name offhand, but I don't think they're even making them anymore. I'm even having a hard time setting the gap for some reason. I've been doing this for years, never had a problem, but with these new points, they're just junk. One thing about the electronic ignition, you won't have points, you won't have a condenser, you don't ever have to adjust anything once you put it in. You'll hear sometimes negativity about the electronic ignition, and I have the box here. I'll show you. This is what I'm using, Petronix. This is made specifically for the Ford N Series front mount distributor. That is not the picture, but I'll show you that in a little bit. You'll hear people complain about them, saying that you know, I put them in and they're junk, they only lasted an hour. I've seen so many bad wiring on some of these tractors. I mean, it's literally just a rat's nest. I don't understand why there's just so much wires hanging around, so much resistors and everything, and I just wonder if that is the problem, why their new ignition system failed. I don't know. That's just a theory that I have. There are so many of these being used not only in tractors but in the antique car world as well. I mean, just racking up a lot of miles. There's a lot of happy customers. I'm sure there's some not so happy customers, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm not saying that they'll never go bad. I mean, it's man-made. It can definitely go bad. But if I had a problem with one of mine tomorrow, I would definitely go ahead and order another one. I know one tractor I got right now, I think I put it back in 2004, I think. Yeah, 2004, and I never had a problem with it. Another good thing is the points, if you keep your tractor outside or maybe not in a garage where you have a little bit more of a controlled environment, you no longer have to worry about corroded points. You don't have to run a file or anything through there to shine them up. You can basically soak these things in water now. They shouldn't really ever skip a beat. It definitely aids in better starting. A lot of claims that they make horsepower. I disagree with that. It could if you had such a bad gap or something to begin with, but as far as gaining anything, no. I mean, if you had a good distributor in working order and you went ahead and say even if you ran it on a dyno and then you put the electronic ignition in, there's really not going to be any difference. Spark is spark. That's the only thing. I guess they use that as a advertising gimmick, but I'm going to go ahead and clean this up real good, and I'll get started on the installation of the electronic ignition. Really simple. You'll be amazed how easy it is. Okay, now with the distributor shaft out of the housing here, there is a bushing in here. it's a good time to check to make sure that isn't too worn, just simply by putting it in there. I mean, you want a little bit of play or it won't be able to turn, but this one's in really good shape, so won't have to replace that. I went ahead and put a little bit of thin film of grease in there after I cleaned this all out with brake clean. Just a couple things to note. There is holes here for that bushing in the shaft. You'll even see the line cut in that shaft. That's to kind of draw and disperse the engine oil. You get oil from the camshaft. It does fling on here. Now the new breaker plate, there won't be any points on it, but it also has a bushing up here where the shaft will fit up through. You'll want to put some grease on there because that will not get lubricated from the engine. You'll never want oil inside of here. But like I said, this is the old one, the old plate. You won't need that ever again. Here is the this black piece is going to go over the cam lobes. Once I set that down in the distributor, I'm going to put that over there. This has got magnets in it, and what that does is it's got little brakes in it, and when it was rotating, that piece will be on the inside here. It's kind of hard to show once it's in there, so I'm showing you now. It's rotating around, and this little chip here will sense the brake and the magnets, and that's when it will spark. So I'm going to go ahead and start assembling this now. Like I said before, there's really no way you can mess up the timing, so go ahead and just put that shaft in there. You'll want to put this on first. Make sure that it's sit down in there the whole way. Then with your new breaker plate, then you want the plastic piece facing up, just like that. Everything's fitting really good so far. Your little sensor here is going to go on these two studs. I got little nuts here to fasten it down. And then you have this little black wire. This is going to go up top to where your points and your condenser were originally. That's going to fasten down. This red wire, this is going to attach to your coil wire and your wiring harness. Alright, I'm going to have to cut it down, or they give you too much, which is good. But you'll notice here on the side of this distributor, it's got like a little a vent. I'm going to have to pull that out. They just pressed in. It's not real hard. Let's get some pliers and pull that out. Not all Ford distributors have that. We got a 46 Ford 2N that I did. It did not have that. So I actually had to drill a hole so I could get that wire up through. This is actually going to go up to the top of the coil, and I'll show you a little bit when it's on the tractor again. But like I said, if you don't have that, you're going to have to drill a hole. We have 48 8N as well. It did have a cap, but not all of them do that. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this secured, and I'll show you what it looks like after everything's together. I have most of the majority of it here together. I just wanted to show you one more thing before I put this snap ring in. As you can see, I fished that red wire. I pulled the little vent cap off. Fished that through there. The black wire goes up on top here with a new brass bolt. That is what your little pigtail on the coil touches. I went ahead and put the nuts to fasten the sensor down. There is a, I should have showed it to you before I put it in there, but there's like a small carriage bolt, but it's like half missing, so it fits in there flat up above the plate there. Anyhow, it sticks out through the side here, and when you go ahead and you put this in there, you want to make sure that is lined up right in dead center of the timing marks there. You can see that little red dot, and you want it right in there. What I did was I just held the top part with my finger, made sure it was nice and flush up against there, and just moved it accordingly, and I just tightened that down. Now your plate will not move, and as far as timing, you won't have to adjust anything. You want that in the dead center, and you'll be good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this snap ring in there, and then we're going to mount it back on the tractor, and I'll show you what to do with this wire. Alright, I just put the distributor back on the front here. Just tighten up this last bolt, and we're getting ready to put the cap back on, attach the wires, and put the new 12-volt coil on. Alright, I'm getting ready to put the new 12-volt coil on, just to let you know that there is a gasket that goes between the distributor and the coil. Also, before you put the distributor on, there is a gasket between the engine and the distributor as well. If you don't have that, you're going to have a lot of oil getting slung around there. But one thing that I've learned through the years, make sure that this little pigtail, this little spring here, is long enough and that it's making contact in that little top brass bolt that's got like a dish to it. A lot of times, if it isn't long enough, it will not make contact, and you'll be wondering why you don't have any spark. So just make sure you go ahead and check that. And lately they've been pretty good, they've been pretty long, but there for a while years ago it seems like every one I ever touched was too long, and I just had to get the needle nose pliers and pull on it, and hopefully it wouldn't break it. But I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Unfortunately, like I've continually said, a lot of the new electric parts just do not fit as well as they should. Like the old ones, the coil that I took off here was a 6-volt. It was an old one. It still had Ford on it. Fit real nice. You get the newer stuff, it just doesn't work as good, but you got to do with what you have, I guess. But easy as that. And then this wire that you have coming out of the distributor, I'm just going to cut it to length, and it's going to go, you have a connector at the top, and you're going to put it underneath that nut, and then bring the hot wire from the wiring harness, and you're also going to connect that to the top. So just a note that also, you don't want this too long, because you can get it caught on the fan and everything. So you don't want it real tight, but you want it where there's really not a whole lot of slop. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that and put the connector on it. I have here in my hands a simple test light. If you don't have one of these, I highly recommend. Really easy to diagnose any problems on these old tractors. I'm just going to ground it anywhere on the tractor, and when you put your test light on the top of the stud here, I have somebody else flipping the ignition switch on, and notice how it lights up. That is how we are able to tell that the wiring is good, the ignition switch is working, and the power is getting to the coil. Another must-have tool is one of these spark testers. There's several different styles. I really like this style because you can adjust the gap in between those two points there. And basically on most of these old tractors, if you don't have enough power to jump at least a 1/4 inch a gap, it's probably not going to be working too good for you. But I'm going to go ahead and hook this up. We're going to see if the coil is functioning and everything. All you really need to do is pull one of the plug wires off and clamp that on there. Bring your plug wire and stick it right up in there. I'm going to zoom in real close so you can get a good view of that spark. And let me get the camera repositioned. So there you have it. We have a really good hot blue spark. You want a blue spark, not orange or anything like that. I got to put the radiator and everything on this tractor yet, but no doubt that this thing will fire right up once we get some fuel to it. What you're looking at now is a brand new reproduction radiator. I mentioned earlier in this video that one of the reasons why I took the hood off is to replace the original radiator, which is right here. And I know a lot of people are probably saying, well, why don't you just have this one repaired? Well, obviously you can tell it's been leaking for a while, whole way across. It needs a new core. It's even leaking here in the back. It's in pretty bad shape. But other than that, the tank and everything, they're really in really good shape. The reason why I didn't have repaired, we just don't have a whole lot of options as far as repair places. There's only like one semi nearby, and the guy was just said honest. He says if you can buy a new one, it will probably be just about the same amount of cost as for him to fix it. So I've dealt with these radiators before, so I went ahead and got another one. This is a Sparex brand, S-P-A-R-E-X. This is the kind that will say restoration quality if you're looking at some of the online parts suppliers. And one of the reasons why it's restoration quality is there is 4 rows of cooling tubes in the radiator. And the tubes is these little tubes you can see running down here. There's 4 rows of them. All the other reproduction radiators for these tractors only have 3. And another thing is the material that is used is exactly like the original, the same kind. Also, it is, I mean, I've measured these before. It is exactly the same height, exactly the same shape, other than just a little bit of a tank difference here. The original ones are a little bit more rounder. That is the only difference, and that does not affect anything. Also, one of the nice things I like about the reproduction ones is right underneath here is the petcock. You can't see it, to drain it. On the original ones, they're actually under here on this neck here, and really hard to get to, kind of a pain. So in actuality, I kind of like these even better than the original ones. Again, that's Sparex, S-P-A-R-E-X. You can look them up. They're about $200, and that's about how much it would cost to fix that. I'm definitely going to keep this one, and I have a couple other ones. If I ever find anybody that can fix it really rather cheap, I'll have it done. I definitely don't want to throw that away. But oh, one more thing. If you are ever thinking about replacing these, this is the original shroud. If you have a reproduction shroud, they will not fit the reproduction radiators. There's little holes here that they screw into. They will not fit. So if you don't have an original shroud, or it's damaged and you want to get a new one, and you're going to use that radiator, it has to be original OEM. It will not, or the remakes will not fit. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Oh, and another thing, I got the new radiator cap here. A lot of these caps, this is separate by the way, it didn't come with the radiator. A lot of these caps are made poorly, and they are not tack welded in the right location, and what happens is you tighten it down and it'll be like that. This one, again, Sparex brand, as you saw there, it fit on there real nice. I can't do that one-handed, but it's nice and straight, which those little things like that bug me if it isn't. But if you run into a trouble, I heard a lot of guys, they actually break that off and then tack weld it where it should be. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this radiator. This video is not about radiators, so I just wanted to show you what's going on here. I'm going to put this on and get this tractor running here real soon. Okay, as you saw in some of those pictures there, got everything back together, and you might also notice right now there is a difference, and I went ahead and put brand new reproduction headlights on this tractor. I was going to go out and just show you the tractor running and charging, but the weather got really cold and I just didn't feel like starting it up and taking it out. But I didn't want to waste any good days, so I went ahead and put the lights on. I wasn't really going to feature this on the video, but I might as well just show it to you. I got these from Dennis Carpenter. These are exact reproduction. I'll get a little closer shot here for you. These do come powder coated. This is the 8N gray color. As you can see, it's a big difference. When I go ahead and paint this tractor all one color, naturally I'm going to paint these, but these are very detailed. They even got the Tracto Light name on them, just like the originals. These are 12 volt naturally. You still can get them 6 volt. I also had to get the nice little ornamental wings here. This tractor never did have headlights from day one, so it's kind of nice to have lights on there that work. Now all 3 of our Fords have front and rear lights. I'll show you the back here. Here's the tail light. This is a license plate bracket. I got that as well. Works real good with a orange triangle. If you ever want to go down the road, just drill the holes in the triangle. Here's the rear work light. This has a switch on the bottom that you turn that on and off with. When I flip the switch, which I actually had to drill right there at the end of my finger, this tractor never had lights, so I had to do everything. And when you pull the switch, the tail lights and the headlights will come on, but this is off if the switch is off. I got the other one. I also had to get these brackets. Most of the time you'll just see one tail light on the back and one work light, but you could do anything you want. We like putting 2. It looks more like a car, kind of balances out the back, and it just looks better, I think. But I also did it with the original style wiring. It's kind of like plug and play, I call it. I can't really see it too good here, but it's like that fabric. It's really nice. Came in a wiring harness. Just did everything real quick. It wasn't hard at all. A little hard to get it ground sometimes. Had to shine up some of the holes in the brackets to get a good ground. But other than that, the installation was pretty simple.